Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for today's webinar, the first Innovation Pathways webinar of the year. My name is Callie Cornell and I'm with the Center for Collaborative Education. And today we are so excited to welcome many of you to Innovation Pathways into the network and to share information about Innovation Pathways and give you a chance to get to know your peers, get to know one another. We recognize that our current climate continues to be very difficult, and so we're really grateful to have each and every one of you on the webinar today. We have just a couple of housekeeping items to cover before we dive in. So that you're aware, this webinar is being recorded and we'll post it after we wrap up today so that you can view it, so that you can share it with colleagues. It will always be there on our Innovation Pathways community of practice website. And so we also have a closed captioning option available to you should you require or want the live transcription. So in the top left-hand corner of your Zoom, you should see a little red live button, sort of similar to that image that's on the screen there. And if you click that down arrow, you'll see an option to open up a web browser window, and that's where you can view the closed captioning in real time. And if we head to the next slide, here is our team. Again, I am Callie Cornell, an Innovation Pathways Consultant with the Center for Collaborative Education, and I'm joined by our Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education colleague, Jennifer Guatkin, who is the Innovation Pathways lead. And Jennifer, I think there are a few DESE colleagues here to introduce, so I'll turn it over to you to introduce those folks.
Good afternoon, friends. It's great to see so many of you, old and new, as I joked in the chat. I'm actually looking through the list of participants to see who's here. I don't want to miss anybody. Actually, I'm scrolling through. I'm not sure if I have any colleagues from DESE on at this moment, but I will let you know if any special guests arrive. I was hoping that we would hear from Regina Robinson, who's our new Deputy Commissioner for Educational Options here at DESE, but not here yet, I believe. But again, great to see so many of you, and I guess I will turn it back over to Callie to maybe introduce other colleagues from CCE.
Excellent. So from CCE, I'm joined by my colleagues, Laura, Dawn, and Allison, and you'll hear from each of them throughout the webinar. And sort of note, Allison's here to help with facilitation and support our tech needs. So if you have any issues as we go through the webinar, please reach out to Allison specifically, and she can sort of help you through some of those issues, either through chat. And so if you're not familiar with CCE, we are a local Boston-based organization whose mission is to transform schools to ensure that all students succeed and have a particular focus on increasing equity and reducing systemic racism. So CCE is partnering with the Mass Department of Education to provide technical assistance to both existing Innovation Pathways designees, as well as those who are in the pipeline to apply for designation this year. So we're so excited to be back again and supporting this work again this year and supporting the community of practice. We have lined up a number of events throughout the year, and we'll talk more specifics about them sort of later on, but we'll have a host of webinars, workshops, program spotlights, professional learning communities, all to support sharing of ideas and connections across Innovation Pathways program network. And today, we're really excited to have you join us, and our goals are threefold. The first is to provide an understanding of the basics of Innovation Pathways, and so we'll cover guiding principles and core characteristics, which might be familiar to some of you, but I think for many of you it might be new if you're new to a particular position within your school or district that's connected to Innovation Pathways, or if you are a new member of the Innovation Pathways team within your district. We'll also have some time to engage in discussion and sort of get to know you conversations with peers across the state. And then, as is always the goal with each of our events, we'll build connections across the network. We are here to bring you all together, but really support your capacity to engage and problem solve and connect with one another as an Innovation Pathways network. So with those goals in mind, our agenda for today will begin with some introductions and connections. We'll jump right into sharing some information about Innovation Pathways and its current impact across the state. And you'll get a chance to reflect on questions and engage in some smaller group conversation around topics that are important or sort of particularly relevant to you, sort of depending where you are in your planning and implementation of your pathway programs. We'll get a chance to share some specific resources and tools that might be helpful to you, again, no matter depending on where you are in your design and implementation or continuous improvement processes. And we'll also introduce some ongoing support opportunities that are coming up. And that will take us to the end of our hour together. as has become a practice for us, we wanted to acknowledge that we are still not in ordinary times. In fact, they are still unprecedented, 18 or so months later. And so virtual teaching, virtual learning, virtual working is a stressor for all of us in many different ways. And this cartoon on the screen says, okay, kids, remember, don't bug mommy when she's in her remote working cubicle, which is a cardboard box, what I assume it would be in a living room or another shared space. And I'm sure lots of folks can relate, even if you're back in a school, participating in a lot of professional learning and meetings virtually. I know I, for one, currently have contractors in my house that are making a whole lot of noise. So apologies if there's any background noise from my end, but we want to share this reminder that we're all sort of remote teaching and remote professional learning, and it requires us all to be more flexible and understanding with one another. And so there will certainly be distractions and interruptions, and we recognize that those can and will happen, and we will sort of be patient with one another as we engage in our professional learning together. We like to make these events as interactive as possible. And so we always have some sort of connection activity at the beginning of our events, and to get to know you a little bit more about who's at the webinar or workshop or other event for the day. And because many of you are new to us, new faces, new names, we'd love to get to know a little bit about where you are in your current experience with Innovation Pathways. So in just a moment, I'm going to launch a poll. So you should see a poll pop up on your screen. And we'd like you to let us know what's your current level of familiarity with Innovation Pathways. Is this your first introduction? Which would be perfectly fine and great and lovely to have you and excited to jump in with you. Have you heard of Innovation Pathways, but you're not quite sure, what programs are in your school or for exactly what that means for your school or district? Or are you sort of an Innovation Pathways guru, sort of with lots of experience and familiarity? So I'm going to launch that poll. You should see that pop up. And we'll give you just a few moments to select an answer that most closely aligns with your current experience. Just as we had fast typers at the beginning, we have fast responders. I see many of them coming in. And it's looking like things are slowing down a little bit. I'll give you just another couple of seconds. It looks like most folks have responded. Most folks look like they're familiar with Innovation Pathways and they know what programs are happening in their school, but don't feel like they're quite hit that very familiar mark yet, which is great. So I'm going to end this poll. Thanks so much for everyone for participating, and you should be able to see these results. Just quickly sharing, you'll see we've got a few folks, a handful of folks who it's their first introduction. We're so excited to have you. A few folks who have heard of IP but aren't very familiar. Again, many of you that sort of are familiar with your programs, know about the options within your school or district, and then another maybe about a third of you that are very familiar or part of planning or implementation teams and very close to the work. So excited to have you all. And we'll keep that in mind as we sort of go through some of our activities and some of our breakout options today. So we'll get in a few moments, we'll get to sharing a little bit more content around Innovation Pathways. But first, we want to give you an opportunity to do some speed round introductions and connections with peers, right? Like that is what today's collaborative web forum is all about. So in a moment, we'll send you into some random breakout spaces, and the goals are sort of twofold, right? One is to meet people, so meet peers, say hello, introduce yourself. And the second is to share some topics or components around Innovation Pathways that you want to learn more about, that you're curious about, you've been thinking about. It might be a challenge, but it's a topic or a component that you really want to spend more time either learning about or talking with peers and colleagues from other schools and districts about. So when you move into your breakout rooms, there should be 3 or 4 folks in the room. It'll be a small breakout room, and you'll have about 8 minutes in your breakout room. So we ask you again to introduce yourself and then each take a turn sharing what's one thing you want to learn more about this year related to Innovation Pathways, or something that you want the chance to talk with a peer about. And at the end of your time, we'd like for you to build consensus among your small group members around the topic that you'd like to learn more about, and choose someone to report that out once we come back together as a large group. And so a hint, we'll use that report out, those topics that you build consensus on and what you want to learn more about, to inform our breakout rooms later in the session, where we'll have some more in-depth discussion and conversation. But for now, we'd love to give you 7 or 8 minutes to jump into small groups, introduce yourself, share what it is you'd like to learn more about, and then choose one person to be ready to report back out once we come back to the main space. So welcome back, everyone. We hope that you had good first group introductions and conversations. We know that they were short, but we promise there'll be lots of other opportunities throughout the year to connect with one another. And I'm hoping that you each have chosen a person to share out from your group about the topic that you would like to learn more about, that you're able to come to some consensus as a team. And so what I'd like to do now is if the chosen one, right, of each group could unmute themselves and share. We'll take turns sort of sharing those topics. I'm going to be taking some notes as we go. And if you hear your topic that was already shared, we don't have to share it twice unless you're sort of a different lens that you heard, that you as a group talked about within that topic or that component for innovation pathways. So I'll open up the floor and feel free to unmute and share what topics it was that you wanted to learn more about.
So in our group, Stephanie Quinn from Chelmsford was very instrumental running our discussion. And Stephanie, you're here. Thank you very much. So we learned a lot from her, from all pros and cons, and the challenging task to outreach to community. That's what we would like to learn more about and get some. And she mentioned, Stephanie, you mentioned having flyers. We would like to learn more about what you included into those flyers and why it turned out to be some sort of a challenging process. So we would like to learn more about outreaching to community. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. And thanks, Stephanie, for sharing that with your group.
I'll go for group 3. I was with Joe, Marlene, and Dennis. And we basically, it sounds like we would just like to learn from others who have added more pathways, if they've already had a pathway, but they're looking to expand, and just kind of learning from others. But we didn't have any really specific questions.
Excellent, thank you. Others?
Okay, I'll go next. If I could go next. My name is Jim Loliberty from Shepherd Hill Regional High School. I was with Fran, and I apologize, I can't remember the individual from Haverhill, but we talked about internships, how to incorporate them into a school schedule. So definitely want feedback on fixed schedule, rotating schedule, how schools are implementing internships.
So my name is Matt Stinson, and I'm going to report out for our group. I work here at Agawam High School, and I was with Derek, who's a principal from Hopedale Junior Senior High, and Mira, who's a program director for Project Learn in Lowell. And it was just great to talk with some administrators and people from different backgrounds. It sounded like Derek really wanted to learn about the process of specifically getting biomedical going. And Mira was, and business and entrepreneur, Mira and Derek shared that in common. They sort of already have business and entrepreneur programs, and they'd like to figure out how to get innovation pathway on board. Biomedical, STEM, computer science was mentioned. And I mentioned I definitely need to learn more about the third course I'm going to be proposing in cybersecurity.
Excellent, thank you.
I was in group 5. And so we are either completely new to innovation pathways or are new in our role dealing with innovation pathways. And so we're just looking to learn whatever we can about the program.
Hi, I can jump in as well. I think we're pretty similar. Our group, I'm not really sure which number we are. I want to say 16, but I might be making that up. I was with Mike from Uxbridge, Greg from Uxbridge, Leah from Mass Higher, and Wendy from Monson. And we're all relatively new. We've got the wettest feet here. We're looking to kind of learn as much as possible in a variety of different, from a variety of different schools of different sizes to see how best we can go forward from here. Thanks.
Excellent, thank you.
I can jump in. Our group, one thing that hasn't been mentioned that our group was interested in was just like the course taking. I think one thing that we're already seem to be struggling with is how do we fit in the required coursework and do it in a way that's really meaningful and sort of seamless for the students.
I'll go next. Christine Scafidi. I'm with the Department of Higher Education in the Gear Up program, and I was lucky to be with Philomena, who's in a Burke School in Boston, and Brian, who works for Mass Higher. Fortunately, Brian and I are supporting the same one of the same communities that he's working in New Bedford, as am I. And so we're both sort of flies on the wall here today to learn and soak in as much as we can, because we want to be able to support our community. And Philomena echoed that she's here to support her students who have a great need. So Brian and I have already taken each other's information down so that we can connect offline, because we're going to be maybe doing some work together, which is exciting.
Excellent. And Christine, that's exactly the purpose of these events, right? Is to make those connections and folks sort of have those organic connections over time. So that's excellent and really exciting to hear. We've heard from a lot of you so far. I'm curious if there are any other topics that came up in your groups that you decided was something to bring to the large group that hasn't been mentioned yet.
Hi, Ashley Smith from Uxbridge. One of the sort of questions, or not so much problems, but something that I had addressed is sort of capturing the students involved in capturing and tracking students involved in a particular innovation pathway program. I'm just kind of curious about what schools are using to try and map out a more efficient and like clean process of us doing that. One of the things I kind of had mentioned too is in previous meetings, we had talked about like how an application has worked for some schools, but has deterred students in other schools. So just kind of, you know, interested to hear what other schools and districts are doing to follow their students.
Great, thanks, Ashley. All right, I'm taking a look at the time and we've got to move on because we only have an hour with one another today. But thanks so much. And a reminder that sort of while we won't be able to have breakout rooms for each one of these topics, when we get to that section of our webinar today, we certainly have these in mind. There'll be lots of opportunities to engage in these conversations and these topics throughout the year. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Laura, to walk us through a few basics around innovation pathways to sort of set the stage, particularly for those groups who are new or sort of less familiar with innovation pathways.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kelly. And I am going to warn you that I'm going to move fairly quickly through this. I know that we have differing levels of familiarity with sort of the background details. But again, a reminder that this is being recorded, so it will be available to you if you need any memory refresh, if I move a little quickly for you. So innovation pathways are state designated programs that connect student learning to in-demand broad industry sectors and guide participating students to relevant post-secondary education and training. The program is designed to provide students with coursework and experiences in a high demand industry, and are designed to create strong partnerships with employers in order to expose students to career options and help them develop knowledge and skills related to their chosen field of study while in high school. Participation in this kind of pathway contextualizes student learning and engages students in their high school experience. And all innovation pathway programs are designed to increase equitable access by eliminating barriers to student participation, so that all students have the opportunity to enroll, participate, engage, and successfully complete these pathway experiences. Schools, districts, and other entities currently apply for designation in one or more pathway areas. With the 22 new programs that were approved in spring 2021, we are very excited that there are now 121 pathways in 49 high schools across 43 districts. This fall, that means that there will be a minimum of about 4,000 Massachusetts students involved in innovation pathway programming, which is incredibly exciting. And if you're curious, you can access a full list of designees on the Mass Department of Education website. So designees must have a program aligned to one of the 5 industry sectors that you can see on your screen. Throughout the course of this year, we want to preview for you that we're going to offer various opportunities for folks to connect with other designee teams in the pathway that their setting is pursuing. And when you have multiple pathways, we'll give you opportunities to connect with folks across those various pathways as well. You can see here that to date, we have a pretty good distribution of pathways across the various sectors that are offered through innovation pathways. And excitingly, 15 of 16 Mass Hire boards are active Innovation Pathways partners. And we know we have some Mass Hire board representation here today. So again, thank you and welcome. So there are a few more details about Pathways that I'm going to share with you in just a minute, but we thought that it would be a great opportunity, instead of just hearing from adults today, we want you to hear a little bit from students about what they believe Massachusetts Innovation Pathways are.
I went into this program my freshman year knowing that I ultimately wanted to become a medical doctor, but I had no clue of what specialty or where to start in my educational journey. So through workshops and guest speakers that the program offers to the students, I've been able to explore and compare the varying career paths and have a direction towards what I want to do post-high school graduation.
I always knew I wanted to go to college for like robotic engineering or something, but I didn't have a good grasp of the kind of job or place I'd want to work after college. And after my internship, I'm probably going to apply to work at FTL Labs since it was a great experience and I'm comfortable with the people there. The Pathways has also given me a lot of chances to do unique classes I wouldn't have had the chance to do or would have even thought to do, like a programming class, networking.
Through the Pathway, I've thankfully gotten the opportunity to meet some of the most driven and ambitious people I know as well. One of my friends from the class is 15 and she's in the process of starting her own clothing brand. And another person from the class just recently got a scholarship for an out-of-state business program, which I think is very incredible. We also had meaningful assignments that connected to the real world.
All right. So I'm going to keep sharing a little bit more about Innovation Pathways, but if you feel compelled, we'd love to hear from you in the chat. If there's anything that stood out to you from hearing from student voices, it can be sort of capturing a phrase any of them used, or if you're thinking differently about Pathways at all. So feel free to use the chat. My colleagues are going to monitor to see what's resonating with you. All right. So moving forward, there are three pretty technical pieces about Innovation Pathways that I'm going to move through now. The first are the guiding principles, and then we have the core characteristics, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the coursework that's involved for Pathways. So starting with guiding principles, Innovation Pathways are grounded in these 5 guiding principles, which work together to provide a framework for the pathway experience. The equitable access principle expresses the commitment that designated programs must prioritize students underrepresented in education, enrollment, and completion. Innovation Pathway programs should be structured in a way to eliminate barriers to student participation. Guided academic pathways provide a description for how programs are structured around clear and detailed student academic pathways in terms of coursework, course sequencing, and experiences outside of the classroom. Students should be exposed to authentic experiences, academic rigor, and substantive career opportunities, allowing them to make informed decisions about career pathways to pursue. Enhanced student supports ensure that programs must demonstrate sufficient wraparound services to promote student success. This includes ways to identify potential academic and non-academic challenges for all enrolled students. Connection to career captures how programs must expose students to targeted opportunities intended to lead to careers. This targeted exposure can come in the form of opportunities for workforce and career skills development, career counseling, and work-based learning. And finally, effective partnerships refers to the requirement of a formal partnership between a school or district and Mass Hire, your local workforce development board, along with one or more employers. Next, we have the core characteristics. All high-quality college and career pathway options in Massachusetts must include these 6 core characteristics, both in the application process to receive designation, and then as you move through the implementation process to help fulfill the guiding principles that we just reviewed. Massachusetts recognizes that these 6 characteristics, when integrated into a coherent set of strategies and services for students, works towards ensuring high-quality pathway programming for students. Under the core characteristic of advising, there's an expectation that well-designed college and career advising is an embedded part of the pathway experience for every student, and that this advising ultimately supports students in developing a clear understanding of the post-secondary options and courses of study available to them, such as higher education, training, and career options. It also requires that students have an individual learning plan. Many of you are familiar with MyCap, and that's the learning plan that we think of for innovation pathways. Programs are aligned to labor market demands in their local region and across the state. When designing programs and applying for designation, programs have to demonstrate that there is a current or projected labor market demand for skilled employees in the chosen workforce sector. Through integrated instruction, students participate in a carefully designed sequence of integrated, rigorous instructional courses relevant to their pathway, including both academic and technical subjects. We'll talk a little bit about that more in a moment. There are structured work readiness, exploration, and engagement activities and work-based learning experiences that are essential components of each pathway program. This is comprised of a 100-hour internship or capstone experience that is aligned to the pathway industry sector. Credential preparation means that the pathway enables students to make progress toward attainment of an industry-recognized credential or college credits toward a certificate, associate's, or bachelor's degree while still in high school. And finally, strong post-secondary linkages refers to students' participation in a wide range of college awareness and engagement activities to inform their post-secondary plans relating to college, apprenticeship, and/or training programs. All students take a minimum of 4 courses as part of their pathway program, 2 technical courses that are connected to building skills and knowledge within the industry sector, and 2 advanced courses such as dual enrollment, AP, IB, or other courses that offer industry certification or college credit. There's academic, career, and interest-based advising and counseling for students, as we've mentioned, including that each student has an individual plan, again, referring to MyCap. Strong industry presence and connection, whereby students are engaging in work-based learning, either through an internship or a culminating capstone experience. Again, this is the 100-hour requirement. Okay, so before we transition, I just want to share a few benefits of being part of this Innovation Pathways community. We're sharing a lot of information with you today by design, knowing that many of you are new leaders in this work. And so to provide assistance as you go through your day-to-day work with Pathways, we'd be happy to point you toward the Community of Practice Technical Assistant website and the Pathways Toolkit, which we'll provide a little bit more detailed information on later on. We are also pleased to be offering for second-year professional learning community meetings, which will provide monthly adaptive come-as-you-are working and learning spaces to connect with folks working in Pathways in different settings. This year, we're very excited to be launching a peer ambassador feature to Innovation Pathways, which will allow you to hear less from us and more from your peers who have been engaged in this work for a bit of time and are happy to share their wisdom, the challenges they've faced, and really be a thought partner to you as you're moving through your own pathway experience. And finally, as we've noted, this webinar is the first of many virtual support events to be offered over the course of this school year. These virtual support events are entirely responsive to the needs that surface in this community. So many topics remain to be determined by what we hear from you today and during future opportunities. For example, a few of the topics that we already have slated for this year are based off of feedback we heard from the community last spring. And so some of those topics include employer engagement, co-planning with students, and designing pathways to advance equity in your school settings. We sincerely hope that today is just the first of many opportunities offered through Innovation Pathways Community of Practice that you end up taking advantage of.
Oh, thank you, Laura. Yes, Laura's going to hand it over to myself. I'm Dawn Shira-Corin, and I'm also one of the CCE support staff on the Innovation Pathways project. Now that you've had an opportunity to hear many of those sort of basic aspects of the program as Laura outlined, we want to return to the topics that you discussed in the earlier breakout rooms, excuse me. And as Callie mentioned, based on some of the things that you shared following those meetings, she came up actually with 4 different topics that we want to invite you to self-select into and have some discussions with your peers. And so Callie has just dropped that into the chat. Those topics are community outreach, expanding your pathway and adding more, internships, and then course taking and sequencing. And so again, remember, there's lots of opportunities in the near future to talk about a wide range of things and the many things that are of interest to you and that are at the top of mind. And today we're going to focus on those 4 things and invite you to go into breakout groups. Before we do that, I just want to give you a couple of directions as you go into those breakout groups. And so Laura's going to move us to the next slide. And I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what we're thinking. So we want you to introduce yourself. We realize it's a fairly big group today. It looks like there's 60 plus participants here, but we still want to use this as an opportunity for you to connect. So we want you to share your name, school, district, and the pathway program, either that you'll have in the near future or that you already have. And so I'm thinking perhaps a quick round of sharing that information, and then not everybody will have an opportunity to share, but we expect you'll have a little bit of time to have a few folks interject and think about what's one thing that has surprised you about Innovative Pathways so far this year. And also either or both, what is a question or challenge you are currently working through related to the particular breakout room that you've chose to go into. So again, think about what surprised you or what question or challenge you might have. And after an opportunity to see who's in the room, see who's a part of the group today, we want you to share some of that information. We will prompt you when you come back to have an opportunity to put those ideas in the chat. We won't have a report out, but again, we'll encourage you to add those things in the chat as we will plan to create a frequently asked questions document that will be shared with you following today's webinar and today's session. So with that said, I just want to remind folks that you'll have the opportunity to self-select, and shortly we're going to open those breakout rooms and invite you to go into each of the rooms.
Thanks so much, Dawn. I would add that you'll have an opportunity to self-select into rooms. So you should see a pop-up in just a moment, and that will prompt you to choose which room. And so we encourage you to choose the room that feels most relevant or most interesting to you, or something you feel like you have to share with colleagues. And our slide here says 15 minutes, though we are a little bit over schedule. So I'm going to you'll see some transparent facilitation here. I'm going to ask my colleagues if we can do 10 minutes within our breakout spaces. We'll come back. We'll have a few things to quickly run through and resources to share, upcoming events to share at the end, and then that will wrap up our time. So thanks so much, Dawn, for introducing that, but just wanted to make those couple of adjustment notes as we go into those spaces.
Thank you, Callie. And one of us will join you in that space to help facilitate and capture some notes. So we'll see everybody there, and we'll see you back in a few moments. We want to again invite you at this time to share any thoughts, your questions, challenges, things that surprised you in the chat, as we want to collect those ideas that you discussed or that came up for you in listening to the discussion, and be able to create a document that can be shared with everyone for an opportunity for you to see and hear what was discussed in some of the other spaces as well. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Callie so we can wrap up the final parts of our afternoon today. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Don. And so we have some resources we had hoped to run through with you, really just surface level information. And so we'll quickly run through the next couple of slides in the another minute we have left. But the Innovation Pathways Toolkit on the Innovation Pathways Community Practice website, which we'll put a link in the chat now, is always available to you. There's lots of information to help support sort of any place you are in your design, implementation, continuous improvement, reflection, or if you're looking for resources around work-based learning or course sequencing or internships, there's lots in there to dig through. So please feel free to use that as a resource, you know, as you work through your pathway programs. And when we send a follow-up email, we'll include some specific links that you might want to connect to and take a look at in the coming weeks. And if we could head to the next slide, just a couple of closing pieces here. I'm gonna, in the interest of time, skip this, though I will hope if you have a quick thing to say what you're looking forward to, you can pop that in the chat, but we'll skip it in terms of timing. Again, the Innovation Pathways Technical Assistance website information is here, that tiny URL /MA Innovation Pathways. Information about all of our upcoming events and to register for upcoming events are there. Information about all of our past events. The nice benefit of having things virtual is it's all recorded, and so all those resources are there for you. Our PLCs, or you can sign up still for the PLCs this year. It doesn't mean that you have to attend every month, but really it's there as a resource for you to connect and talk with colleagues along the way. Again, we have our peer ambassador program. Nominations are still open. So if you or yourself or you have a colleague who you think would be an excellent peer ambassador, please nominate them or nominate yourself for that opportunity. And more information about peer ambassadors is on the technical assistance website, that link at the top of the screen. We have lots of events coming up, and so we encourage you to take a look at those and register for those, and hope to see you, particularly at our upcoming workshop, which is on October 14th in just a couple of weeks. And again, we'll sort of make sure to share out all of these links in our follow-up email to you today. And then finally, we do take our surveys very seriously. And so at the end of every event, if you've joined us before, you know we have surveys. And so if one of my colleagues could put this survey link in the chat, we really do look at each and every one of your responses. And as Laura had said earlier in the webinar, we use them to inform all of our future opportunities. And so if you could take, it should take you literally 2 minutes, if that, to complete the quick survey. Let us know how today went for you. And we use this information to design and to come up with topics and opportunities throughout the year. And so if you can't complete it now, if you can open that link into a web browser and come back to it by the end of the day or tomorrow morning, that would be great. But thank you all for being with us here today. I recognize that we are a minute over and we all have places to be and things to do, and there are so many competing priorities for you, particularly at this point in the school year. And so we just thank you so much for being with us today. You can, and the next slide has my email address as well as Jennifer's email address, but you feel free to contact any one of us for questions. We'd love to hear from you, and we look forward to getting to know you and seeing you at our events throughout the year. Thank you so much, everyone.